Today is the first day of the Burger Reich. The hogs are in full force. People who are shunned or afraid to say things out loud today are saying, I'm driving around our neighborhood looking for illegals and reporting Mexicans. Join me and I want to die. People like that live near me. Yeah. The Burger Reich is here and America's demise is near. Okay. Democrats sold the country off and sold your rights away, signed your rights away. We're an embarrassing country. And I think that even Trump supporters are somewhat aware of the demise. Donald Trump is going to be a horrible president, and it's starting right now.
I said to Melania, what do you think? And she said, you want to do this again?
If today you are excited that Donald Trump is finally the president again after 4 years of the Brandon regime, where Republicans were sent off to work camps for the crime of being patriotic or saying that there are two genders or whatever. And that finally a new dawn, a new day is upon us, and all of a sudden egg prices are going to go down. The price of goods are going to be manageable. All of a sudden you're going to start making more money at your job. Your boss is no longer going to screw you over. You're magically going to be able to pay rent. You've been duped. It's not going to happen. Just letting y'all know it's not going to happen. What will happen, on the other hand, is that all of the things that you enjoy, all of your consumer goods that you enjoy are going to continuously get worse and worse year over year. Your life standards or your work standards are not going to improve. And you're probably going to find yourself even more angry because there will be a bully pulpit that tunes you up every second of the day, trying to make you hyper-focus on your neighbors that are responsible for your demise. It's not the wealthy. It's not the powerful. They deserve corporate tax cuts. That's coming. And slowly but surely, I think the American war machine will continue tuning up as it has. In many ways, nothing will change. In some very meaningful ways, things only stand to get worse. An apt MLK quote for this photo: by the millions, people in the other America find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. That's a good one. In the grand scheme of things, the Trump administration is not going to make America's... How do I describe this? Like, I think we're fucked regardless of whether it was Kamala Harris or Donald Trump winning the presidency. Like, I think America, the American project, is coming to a close. But I do think that Trump will make it faster, if that makes sense. Like, I think that our demise is inevitable. And I also think that Trump supporters themselves kind of see it too. Maybe last time around, maybe in 2016, they had an environment of hope and change. White man's Obama, ironically enough, had taken over the government, and it was the first time around, so they were excited. This time, it's more about vengeance upon their enemies, enforcing cruel and unusual punishments upon those who they feel have betrayed them. Liberals, trans people, Mexicans, and the like. But overall, I think everyone's kind of, like, even normies, I would say, kind of have this attitude where they feel like things are not looking too good, even with Donald Trump as president. All I'm saying is, second time, Trump version 2.0 is perceived as very normal. Okay? Trump version 2.0 is no longer weird, odd, unique, an aberration. Trump version 1.0 was not necessarily unique in terms of like what he did, because he was the logical endpoint of the Republican Party, right? And I maintain that position quite a bit, and liberals would get mad at me whenever I said like Trump in 2016 was doing things that the Republicans would do. The only difference was he was more incompetent, more openly about his corruption, and also utilizing the bully pulpit to accelerate racist rhetoric, right? Normalizing and accelerating racist rhetoric. And people will get kind of mad at me about it. They would say, like, what do you mean? No, you don't understand. Trump is different. Trump is different. Trump is a different type of president. It's like, no, he accelerated down to January 6th, down to all of the election is stolen conspiracies. Donald Trump's attitude was not different than the rest of the Republican Party. His communication was different than the rest of the Republican Party. And I used to point to the likes of Paul Ryan, institutional Republicans that were considered normal Republicans that would get like puff pieces about how he likes to work out and stuff like that by GQ, doing the same exact the elections are stolen by immigrants rhetoric, but using very different words, like never fully openly stating that as a fact. Donald Trump, on the other hand, took away the dog whistles and basically went full tilt with it. Like he cast aside the civility and the aesthetics of civility. And I think that was shocking for a lot of liberals. They're like, what are you talking about? This is not how we do. This is not how we operate. This is not who we are. But while I was, clowning on the aesthetics focused, optics focused, civility focused, resistance liberalism the first time around, I do still think that level of pressure, at least to a certain degree, created a permission structure and a counterbalance against all of the awful things that the Trump administration was doing. And liberal media also was hyper focusing on all of the awful things that the Trump administration was doing. It's not happening this time around. That's what's truly interesting. It's not happening this time around. So I don't know what's going to what that's going to look like now. Liberalism is dead. It was already on its, it was already gasping for air, but it's officially, I think, dead. And what comes next, unfortunately for everyone, is obviously fascism. They have capital accumulation. They have concentration of power, backing from the capital accumulators and those who have concentrated power. They have better organizational structure. They have better entry points into institutional control. And very clearly, that is the new game in town. So we'll see what happens next. But as you look at all of these like wealthy aristocrats and politicians smiling and dining together, just remember that this is in some ways going to be the expected outcome. This was always going to happen, but Donald Trump, I suspect, will, accelerate America's demise even more. CNN, while pointing out all the tech billionaires and CEOs, President Trump's inauguration just glosses over the millions said billionaires and CEOs funneled to Trump, and instead treating it as a branding and aesthetics exercise.
And then just scattered throughout are these tech CEOs.
Yeah. I mean, the exclusivity of this room is incredible. I mean, there are governors and high-level elected officials who are in the overflow.
Like, if you're a Republican today and you're watching me right now, or you're watching CNN, you go, what's the problem? Every other previous Democratic administration has enjoyed all of this glazing from our tech overlords. Why is it a problem when we finally have that? Right? And I think that's a valid perspective to have. And that's what I'm trying to explain, is that the billionaires, no matter who's in charge, do not have your best interest in mind. And I hope that is clear when you come here. That's why I always say there's no such thing as like good billionaires and bad billionaires or whatever, that they only care about profit. And now, because they recognize that there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of instability born out of the wealth inequality, that they consider someone like Trump to be a better alternative than the Democratic Party that is seen as incompetent, because Trump represents order with a fist. Okay, because that's what fascism is. That's what fascism has historically offered the wealthy oligarchs of the past. That is precisely what Hitler's bargain was. That is precisely the reason why he was backed by a lot of these wealthy capitalists in Nazi Germany. At a time when there's instability, fascism presents order, okay? Order through violence, order through brutality. But more importantly than order, fascism does not actually overthrow the pre-existing hierarchy. It maintains it in increasingly more violent ways. That's what happens. It offers stability at a time of instability. Why did Kamala have more billionaire donors then? See, this is what I'm saying. Like, I don't care. I don't like Kamala Harris. I don't like that she was cozying up to billionaires either. You are a regular American. You are not a billionaire. You are not an oligarch. And as a regular American, it does not matter to you whether those billionaires are standing next to a Democrat or a Republican. Both parties in this duopoly will serve their interests. Key sectors like oil and gas will hedge their bets more in favor of the Republican Party. And in the past, tech sector billionaires were oftentimes hedging their bets with the liberal mechanisms of control. Seems like they feel pretty comfortable with both parties. Of course they do, because they are. At the end of the day, Democrat or Republican, both parties, with some exceptions, at least on the Democratic side with like the likes of Bernie Sanders or whatever, both parties are there to serve their interests. Both parties are there to manage their profit-seeking attitude. Both parties are there to, do a little bit of deregulation, do a little bit of tax cuts, one more so than the other. My point is that both parties under our duopoly serve the interests of capital. What's unique about this predicament, what's unique about this situation unfolding in front of us, is that this time around, the tech billionaires that have presented themselves as liberals for a very long time are openly saying they're on board with the Republican train now. They're on board the Trump train. They're going choo-choo. But the question I have remains, which is, why are we servile to their interests? Why do we have to sit back and let them dominate the conversation? It doesn't seem like a democracy, does it? All right, let's see what the CNN, what the good people over at CNN had to say about all these tech billionaires sitting side by side, standing side by side with the Trump
and then just
admin,
scattered throughout
admin.
are these tech CEOs.
Yeah. I mean, the exclusivity of this room is incredible. I mean, there are governors and high-level elected officials who are in the overflow. But these folks, we should also remind people, they paid money into the Donald Trump inaugural fund. Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, they wrote $1 million checks. And $1 million check, I suppose, gets you in the room where it happens.
I agree with you, Abby, but this is about as mutually beneficial as it gets.
They're not wrong when they say it's a mutually beneficial relationship. They're not wrong about that. They're right about that. It is mutually beneficial. Wealthy members of the oligarchy purchase politicians, purchase Congress in order to ensure that they never get regulated when regulation is a necessity. And also, Trump simultaneously takes advantage of any mode of communication that will give him a benefit, that will boost him, that will accelerate the right-wing attitude, like that will serve the purpose of pushing right-wing messaging. Jeff Bezos owns a newspaper. Jeff Bezos owns Washington Post. Elon Musk owns Twitter. Google owns YouTube, and obviously Google as well, and numerous other properties. Mark Zuckerberg owns Facebook. Tim Cook obviously owns Apple. The last part of that equation was TikTok. And we know, and as I've covered this before, TikTok wanted to get in the good graces of the Trump administration, or at least like the Republican Party, because they thought if we actually glaze Donald Trump, they won't get us banned. And we can continue having TikTok. And it worked. And here it is, the CEO of TikTok sitting next to the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, at President Trump's inauguration. How do people still think the Republican Party is against the establishment and the elite? Marketing. The reason why people think the Republican Party is against the establishment and the elite, despite the fact that it's comprised entirely of the elite and it's comprised entirely of the establishment, and it is the establishment once again, is because of marketing. Because they think, it's the same reason why people think that someone like Ted Cruz or any number of different like Republican politicians are real salt of the earth guys, and AOC, in spite of the fact that she was a fucking bartender 4 years ago or 5 years ago, is actually not a real salt of the earth kind of person and not close to the working class because she's a brown woman, okay, from New York. Ted Cruz wears the snakeskin boots and can then adorn the aesthetics of the working class. And that's what it is. People respond to that. In the United States of America, because class politics are so muddied, so eviscerated, so thoroughly gutted, that how you look and how you carry yourself and how close you are to being like racist is a better signifier in the eyes of many for being working class, for being of a working class background, than being quote unquote woke. Wokeness is identified with elitism. The Democratic Party is identified with HR, management, professional managerial class. There's one thing that I'm also worried about with respect to TikTok. Remember what I said about TikTok, like juicing right-wing algo stuff? I worry about what the TikTok algorithm is going to look like in the Trump administration. Because if TikTok goes by the way of Twitter, we're done. It's over. Global permanent neo-Nazi regime. Every single social media platform in the United States of America is incredibly slanted to the right. I do think that the TikTok CEO, and TikTok in general, absolutely boosted Charlie Kirk. I've talked about this before. And I think the reason why they did that is because they thought if they boost Charlie Kirk has Trump's ear, and he will say nice things about TikTok, and he will talk about how TikTok is wonderful for making the youth more right-wing. I do believe that. This is something that I have talked about quite a bit. And actually, as far as it stands, it was a successful gambit. Now, having said that, will they continue doing that? Probably. I don't know. TikTok, as far as I have seen from my own personal anecdotes, but also from like some of the relatively shitty media analysis that is readily available, TikTok is the only social media platform that has parity in terms of political ideology. Every other platform is dominated and slanted to the right. Every single one. TikTok is the only platform where there is some semblance of parity. This is important to acknowledge. But that doesn't mean that there isn't right-wing content on that platform. Of course there is. And I think one of the best arguments that I saw about this, one of the best warnings that I saw came from, what's his name? Garrison Hayes.
This is the worst possible day to have a bad opinion because you won't get a chance to fix it tomorrow. A lot of your political enemies want to save TikTok. Like the right-wing propaganda machine known as Turning Point USA bragged that they were doing 60 million views a day leading up to the election, like this just this past election cycle on TikTok alone. If there is anyone who understands the impact of getting that many views per day, it is your soon-to-be president, Donald J. Trump, the man who actively lobbied the Supreme Court to save this app. If you were one of the many people who were wondering why so many young people were turning toward the right, especially in this past election, it is at least in part because while your side of the algorithm is gender justice and free Palestine, there is another side of the algorithm. And it isn't made up of a small number of people. There are a ton of people on that other side of the algorithm. It is essentially a full-blown hate crime factory. Like, it's just convincing people to hate other people constantly. This is just something to consider. Like, who stands to benefit the most from a power perspective?
I think that it's important to also recognize this aspect of it, because on the one hand, while TikTok still has some semblance of parity, ideological parity, that still means that there is a steady flow of insane right-wing nonsense on there. And I do think that right-wingers understand the value that TikTok gives them in terms of propaganda, in terms of yet another platform where they can supercharge their right-wing propaganda, reactionary content that creates loyal soldiers for the Republican Party and creates loyal soldiers for the reactionary movement in general. Okay? It doesn't have to immediately... it doesn't have to actually make, for example, young men, right, into people that are card-carrying Republican Party voters. That's not the project. The project is, as long as they are apolitical but right-wing in a lot of these like key issues, they can be captured. Their attention can always be captured, and their anger and resentment can always be weaponized. I do think that that's important to recognize, and it goes along with something that I've been warning about quite a bit in terms of like how right-wing young male spaces look like nowadays. And TikTok, just like every other platform, TikTok is not alone in this, and TikTok is far from the worst platform on this issue. YouTube is terrible for this, okay? Twitter is obviously the worst one out of all of them. Facebook doesn't really have a lot of young people, but Facebook is also very right-wing as well. Like, all of the social media platforms that we use that are seen as like the only places where people can gather and communicate with one another are incredibly slanted to the right. That is devastating. Okay? This was part of the reason why I maintained the position that TikTok was while still churning out right-wing propaganda at an alarming rate, still had some semblance of leftist commentary on it as well. And I know that people will say, Hasan, this is just like silly social media platform stuff. Like, why do you care about this so much? But in an environment where we do not have any sort of organizational tools, and that our production capacities, our forces of production are basically moving away from the assembly line, so that we are more alienated from our labor and we're more isolated from one another, which makes it harder to organize, which makes it harder to recognize solidarity, class solidarity specifically amongst workers. The only place where people actually gather in groups are online. And online spaces can be easily manipulated. Online spaces can be easily manipulated, easily brigaded, change people's attitudes over certain things. And the more time we spend online and away from other people, the worse I think these organizational tools will become. The more right wing these social media platforms get, the worse things get overall. Yes, but isn't TikTok most views for progressive content versus other social platforms? I know, that's why I'm saying that, like, TikTok has been both a benefit and a burden at the same time. But in comparison to all the other content platforms out there, it's certainly not the worst. It's definitely better than the other ones. And that is part of the reason why I maintain the position that TikTok shouldn't get banned. That's the reason why I think people wanted TikTok to get banned. That's what carried it over the finish line.
This one really mattered.
And you know, this great coverage we've been able to bring you all day, courtesy.
Bro, that's crazy, dude. They have a betting app. Oh my God, they have a betting app that's like sponsoring the inauguration, where they're talking about Trump's banning of TikTok chances. Dude, I don't know how else to describe how dystopian America is right now, okay? I just don't know. I don't know what else to say. America's on fire all the time. It's underwater all the time. There are, like, Texas probably is going to lose its energy once again due to climate change. It was like snowing in Houston the other day. Okay? And it's not even like a cool dystopia. Where are the fucking neon lights? Where's my Suckmaster 5000? I don't got none of the cool stuff. The only capitalist dystopia that we exist under allows the leadership to do cryptocurrency rug pulls a day before they actually become the president. Like, that is how lame things are. While I do know that things were going to get bad, I just didn't think that it would be like the collapse of American empire would be so lame, you know?
I shouldn't say this. I'm going to get hell when I say this, but her feet are